Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frater Eleftheria, and tonight we're going to be talking about quite a contemporary topic in terms of magic and the occult, and that is the topic of chaos magic. I'm going to give my thoughts on chaos magic and the basics of chaos magic, my experience with it, and also a bit of a comparative analysis between chaos magic on the one hand and the older traditions on the other, and what the pros and cons I think are of each of those, touching a bit upon the idea of magical paradigms as well, or paradigms in general. So, you can find books on chaos magic, you can find books on a number of different esoteric traditions, religious traditions. I'm hoping to do a bit of a comparative analysis tonight and share my views and my experiences. So my understanding of chaos magic comes from really two major sources. The main source by far is the work of Peter Carroll, and also I've read a bit of Andre Vitamus's work and watched a couple of things of his, and that's where my knowledge of chaos magic comes from for the most part. And really, chaos magic, which is a 20th century school of magic, found its roots in the work of Austin Osman Spare, a member of the AA at one time, who never identified himself as a chaos magician, but really much of the underlying themes of chaos magic can be attributed to Spare. And what chaos magic is really, if you're thinking about different genres of music, chaos magic would be the punk of magical systems. It's very much a rebellion against order and structure, against the status quo, against grand narratives, and really it takes the idea of magic to the utmost limit. It pushes it as far as it can in the direction of the subjective experience. So one thing which chaos magic is known for is the motto of nothing is true, everything is permitted. There's a bit of rattling behind me. It's because there's a storm going on outside. And really there is an influence of modern philosophy that we can see in the way that term is used in the context of chaos magic, a touch of perhaps existentialism or postmodernism, in asserting that this world that we take for granted as being real is really just our perception of the world, our own biases, our own beliefs overlaid on top of that. And nothing can exist without seeing it through the lens of belief. And so the idea is, if you can change your beliefs, you can change the world. And so there's no limit to that exercise, and then there's in turn no limit to why we should be restricted to a particular belief system in exercising our magical will. At least that's the philosophy of chaos magic. The other important thing about chaos magic, I suppose, is that it distills down magic to the very bare basics. So it dispenses with all of the kind of bells and whistles of needing certain ceremonial tools and certain incense and all of this sort of thing, certain prayers, all of this sort of thing, and a specific set of rules in order to perform a magical ritual. According to chaos magic, all you really need is intent and belief, and everything else that makes up a magical ritual exists solely to inspire this sense of belief or focus this intent that you have in the ritual. And so once you accept this premise of chaos magic, it becomes possible to completely customize your magical practice, so you can use just about anything as a focus for your magical intent. You can create your own individual magical system based on whatever you want, whether that's, Beanie Babies or lost in space or whatever it is, if it works for you, if it focuses your intent, if it's something you can invest enough belief in to get a result, then according to chaos magic, that's legitimate. And chaos magic is one of the schools of thought of magic and the esoteric that I explored when I was younger. And, I've got to say, there are a lot of good things that I found came out of chaos magic. There are a lot of ways that it opened me up and opened my mind in a way that I don't really think any other magical tradition could have done as effectively. So one thing that chaos magic really helped me appreciate was how to be flexible in my magical practice. There's always people, particularly, when you post videos like I do online, going through this or that ritual or whatever it is, there's always going to be the stickler who says, oh, you didn't use this god name, or oh, you didn't do this specific motion at the end that everybody else does, therefore you're wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're doing the ritual wrong. And I think that misses the whole point of magic, which is, we're trying to transcend the ordinary. And whatever tools we have, whatever rituals we have to do that, whatever alternative language of existence we use to do that, it's about transcendence. And there's people that want to gatekeep and want to keep you in a box and just correct you and over things that are really petty and don't matter, which is a profoundly unmagical way of thinking. But one thing that chaos magic taught me was to let go of that need to adhere strictly to a particular ritual, of having every single tool that I might need for a ritual. If I can find something else that I can substitute that for, that is going to vest that belief of that particular part of the ritual, then I would do that. If it's something that I can do through visualization instead, I'd do that. If it's something I felt I could dispense with altogether, I would do that. And so it allowed me to have that flexibility in my practice and really getting down to the core of magical practice and looking at why we do things in rituals. Do we do them just because that's what Liber XYZ says, and we're just going to do what we're told without actually understanding the reason why? Or do we want to understand what that feature of a ritual is supposed to do and then decide for ourselves if that's the best way of doing it or if it's even something we need? And then once we understand everything that we do need, we may choose to include that part of the ritual, but we may find that we can get the same result some other way. And so, that kind of critical thinking about what you're doing in a ritual, I think is very important, and something which I certainly learnt to do a lot more as a result of exploring chaos magic. Another thing that I found was really good about exploring chaos magic was that it really encouraged me to strip down my magical practice to the bare bones of what was essential. And it helped me to understand what is the bare minimum resources that I need in order to successfully do a magical ritual. And, one of the most chaos magic-y things that I ever did was actually, when I was at work, opening up a blank notepad that I had on my desk for taking notes at work, and just a biro from like you'd use in any office, and I doodled a sigil. I made a sigil then and there, by crossing out the letters and all of that. And I've done a tutorial on making a sigil on this channel if you're interested in that. But I just did it with a biro on the lined paper with the blue lines through it, and then I spent like a few seconds putting my intent in it very intensely, and it worked. I got what I wanted. But it's really empowering to know that you need so little, because you kind of, when you're used to doing like more involved ceremonial magic, you almost feel like you need that crystal ball, or you need that magic wand, or you need that book of spells, that grimoire. And if you don't have it, then You can't use the magic. But when you're forced to really improvise with what you have, you realize that it all comes from inside, and everything else is just an extension of your will, and that is what makes it the magical tool at the end of the day. But there's no doubt that, having a big goblet as your chalice, like a medieval goblet, is much more glamorous than just having a glass from the kitchen. But chaos magic, for certain people, can have a different kind of glamour because of the very punkiness of it. Another thing that I learnt from chaos magic that I felt was really valuable to my learning about magic and about the world of the esoteric and spirituality was the concept of magical paradigms. So another well-known motto from chaos magic is that belief is a tool. Basically, this is the idea that the beliefs that we have, the belief systems, whether that's a religious system or whatever else, doesn't have an objective reality. It's true because we believe it to be true. And so the reason for the belief then is no longer about whether the belief itself is more real than any other belief, when everything is so subjective when it comes to religion, some people would argue. But really, it becomes a question of how useful is that belief for you being able to survive and thrive in the world. So it's this idea of belief as a tool. And it also means that you, the individual, are empowered, rather than the inverse being the case where you are the tool of a belief. Or in fact, where you are the tool of a belief system that somebody else is in control of. And so you're kind of abnegating your will to the will of another person. But the kind of philosophical dimension to this idea aside of belief as a tool, I found it really useful to think about belief and human life from the perspective of magical paradigms. So basically this idea is you're a chaos magician, you don't really believe in anything other than yourself. Like a chameleon, you can adopt different belief systems as though you're putting on different items of clothing so that you can sort of play with what it's like to experience life from the perspective of being inside that belief system for a time. And once you've had your fun with it and you've used it for what you want, you discard it and you can adopt another belief system that serves different ends. And this is the idea of using belief as a tool. And while I think that it's a bit frivolous to treat beliefs as something to be used so flippantly, when in fact, there are certain beliefs that really do deserve our respect for what they have inspired people to accomplish down through the centuries. I think that too often in life we attach labels to ourselves, and then the label becomes the essence of who we are as a person. Like that label describes the entirety of that person, when human beings are much more complicated than that. And they've got more dimensions to their personality than that. And so human beings, we really have a lot of different labels that we can attach to ourselves. We have lots of different skins, lots of different masks that we put on, lots of different ways of being that we adapt in different circumstances that can be different from day to day or hour to hour. And we are not fully one of those things. We are each of them at a given time. And the complete person inhabits each of these different paradigms at different points in their life. And so I think, aside from being a magical tool, just the general idea of paradigms is very useful for being able to understand human nature, because human beings, we are shapeshifters. And, it's kind of sad if a person has the same belief system their entire life and doesn't question it. I think that a more natural way of being is to have different beliefs throughout your life. You know, there was one time when I was a Catholic, when I was very young, and that's not who I am anymore. There was a time when I was a Thelemite. That's not who I am anymore. There was a time when I considered myself a Gnostic above all else. And I think that part of my life, that chapter, has probably come to an end as well. And there'll be some other paradigm that I step into quite naturally, not because I'm, treating different belief systems like they're going out of fashion, and being frivolous about it, but just because of the natural evolution of a human being. Political views as well. I had very different political views, even 5 years ago, to what I have now, because of the way that the world has changed, and because of the way that members of the political movements that I used to support have just gone completely over the top and just completely lost touch with reality. But if I stayed stuck, if I stayed, fossilized in that old way of doing things and didn't change when it was natural to do so, that would be unhealthy. And so I think that's one really good thing that we can learn from chaos magic, is being comfortable with moving in and out of different magical paradigms, or just spiritual paradigms in general. But of course, there are also things about chaos magic that don't really sit that well with me. Obviously, I don't identify as a chaos magician. It's not something that I would ever call myself, although I have studied it at various times in my life. I would much more comfortably fit under the umbrella of Western esotericism, in the old school kind of a sense. So what is it about chaos magic that I kind of feel is unappealing, at least to me? Well, I spoke about how chaos magic is very much a postmodern form of magic, and to me that's part of the lack of appeal. There was a time where postmodernism seemed really cool and really refreshing, deconstructing a lot of old, calcified, really stale grand narratives and belief systems that were holding back Western civilization. But now we find ourselves at a point where postmodernism has gone so far and it's deconstructed so many of these huge belief systems that held society together that it's also deconstructed the good parts of it. And we find ourselves now in a state of just complete chaos and discord, where civilization itself is under threat, and there are people who relish the idea of destroying civilization and don't seem to realize how much danger they're putting everybody in by doing that. And that's part of the inheritance of postmodernism. Everything can be taken to an extreme, including postmodernism, and we're seeing the consequences of that now. There's a lot of internal spiritual turmoil that people are feeling now as a result of being deprived of anything that they can cling to for meaning in life. Everything's deconstructed. Everything has no purpose. You just exist in the world as it is, and there's just all these competing narratives, and all of them are equally true, so it seems. There's no objective reality, there's no objective morality, there's just noise. There's just legion. And that is not a good situation for us to be in. It's a very dangerous and very destructive way for the mass psyche to be. So we would benefit from the structure and the order that these grand narratives would have once provided. I mean, I'm kind of sick and tired of everything that is old being cast away and deconstructed, or culture jammed, and cultural icons being vandalized. I'm kind of over it, And it's almost become the new grand narrative in its own right, ironically enough. Postmodernism, postmodern kind of contempt for anything that is, traditional, anything that provides a sense of objective moral values must be destroyed. And that almost has become a grand narrative in and of itself, ironically. So postmodernism has become the very thing that it swore to destroy, which makes one wonder, what is the point of postmodernism at all when we could just have a different grand narrative that, doesn't make everyone dysfunctional? So that's the big flaw with postmodernism, and because it's so linked to the ethos of chaos magic, it kind of makes chaos magic a bit harder for me to really be able to take seriously anymore. One thing as well with chaos magic is, although it kind of opens everything up, in a paradoxical way, it can also be very limiting, because, you've got all these old traditions that went before that build upon hundreds and hundreds of years of, the culture telling itself a story and feeding back and developing the storyline further, versus something that you've just made up yourself. Or, if you refer to pop culture, I mean, that is a kind of narrative universe, a narrative space in itself, within which you can have a magical paradigm, but it still is dwarfed by, the living traditions of the great civilizations spanning back hundreds or even thousands of years. The great characters and the great stories of modern pop culture ultimately are just a retelling of much older stories, like Harry Potter, like Lord of the Rings, like Star Wars before Disney. What do you have? You have a chosen one character. You have, stories of redemption. You have stories of sacrifice by the hero, even to the point of giving up their own life and perhaps coming back again, even if it's in another form. The story of, the king who must return to the throne, who has been lost for so long, whose throne must be restored. Even the Matrix, the story of the One. All of these things are just retellings of the story of the Christian narrative, and to some extent, the Jewish narrative as well, from which Christianity stemmed. So it's a tale as old as time, and so even when we draw upon more modern stories, ultimately those stories have ancient antecedents, and you can't really go deep into understanding what makes those stories so profound without understanding the source material. And so that's one of the great benefits of an older tradition that I find, in my experience, versus having a more chaotic kind of approach. And even with more modern movements, which might be influenced by chaos magic, but might just be in the same category of chaos magic in terms of being a more contemporary movement that is rebelling against the old traditions of the past and trying to establish something new. What you often find in those traditions, I'm thinking about esoteric orders in particular, is that when they tell the story about how their great order was founded, it's never, me and my friends were in the library, the other week, and we decided that we were going to start an order. The origin story is always something along the lines of, our lineage can be traced all the way back to Egypt or Atlantis or whatever, and we are merely the ones who are reviving that order. And so there's this attempt to link into a much older story. You see it with the medieval grimoires as well, the 6th and 7th books of Moses. It has to be attributed all the way back to Moses to give it that clout, to give it that credibility. Another example might be, the Simon Necronomicon. The most well-known real Necronomicon that is in circulation today, the Simon Necronomicon. It proclaims itself to be the Necronomicon described by H.P. Lovecraft, written by Abdul al-Hazred, and dating all the way back to Sumerian times. All of the spells, invocations are in ancient Sumerian, but that's not the true origin of the Necronomicon. I actually know the true origins of that book, and I'm not going to name names, but my superior in the AA, when I was involved in the AA, actually knows the guy that wrote the Necronomicon and told me the story of how it came to being. And it was a bunch of guys in an occult bookshop in the 70s, ingesting certain substances and deciding, oh, you know what we should do? We should write the Necronomicon. And that's the story of how the real Necronomicon came to be. But that's not the story that it tells in the prologue. There's all this stuff about ancient Sumeria and Abdul al-Hazred, etc. So even these relatively new traditions, magical orders, magical paradigms, magical texts, try and pass themselves off as something much older, even when they might be very influenced by chaos magic themselves, which to me seems to be acknowledging that there's tremendous value in older traditions and tapping into and building upon older traditions. There's a lot of downsides to clinging too strongly to a tradition, because traditions can sometimes become obsolete. As the world moves on, there are certain ways that we did things that won't be as holding as much weight as they did back when they were created, when perhaps they were more relevant. And being stuck in a tradition can lead to the meaningless repetition of the same thing, and a kind of an end to the quest for knowledge, because we believe we've found all the answers, which will stagnate us ultimately. And when powerful people insist that you have to follow a certain tradition, it can of course lead to oppression and authoritarianism and a loss of personal freedom and personal autonomy. So those are all the bad things that can come from tradition. But one thing that I think we've lost sight of in these postmodern times is all of the good things that we owe to tradition. The way that it gives us social cohesion, the way that it unifies us with a common story, the way that it allows us to stand on the shoulders of giants. So when you have a tradition, you've got, generations of people all building upon one another's experience to create, a really rarefied form of knowledge and expertise, which you can then be given without having to do the work yourself to figure out the answers. And so you can start further along than you would have without that tradition, and that can be a tremendously powerful thing. And tradition can also be good because, if something has lasted for hundreds of years or even thousands of years, that can often be, sometimes it can just be because institutions of power keep reproducing that tradition and there's nothing that can really challenge them. But sometimes it's because there is something in that tradition that is timeless and precious and has stood the test of time. And long after people forget about, choosing the man or the bear, they will remember the things that are taught in this tradition, because that is how tried and tested and tried and true those underlying beliefs really are. And even if you don't care about all of those grand narratives and all of those what may be futile attempts to create objective truth in a chaotic and discordant world or universe or multiverse or whatever, I think that you can still argue in favor of tradition from the perspective of belief as a tool. And that is because quite often a older tradition that you have as your paradigm or the system that you work in spirituality, in magic, whatever, often that system can have a lot of advantages over other systems, including systems that you might have custom made yourself. If there's a certain belief, and a lot of people invest their mental and psychic energy in reinforcing that belief, in adhering to that belief, the belief becomes stronger. It kind of gains a kind of tangibility and a reality to it, which a belief that had much less adherence wouldn't have. It's kind of like the idea of the tulpa in the Tibetan tradition, this idea that you can bring something into being, like an egregore or, like a thought form. If enough people believe in it, and the more people that believe in it, the stronger it becomes, until it sort of takes on a life of its own. And so your thoughts and your beliefs feed something and make something more real in the spiritual world. And it's the same with belief systems, arguably. So then, if you wanted to tap into some serious spiritual power in order to perform your magic, then why wouldn't you go to refer to a belief system that has billions of adherents, that has the belief and the psychic energy of billions of people infused within it? Doesn't that just seem like a more powerful paradigm to follow? Of course, you still have to genuinely believe in it yourself, but the point still stands. Another thing that's really good about, old traditions is that often beliefs can be made stronger when multiple people believe a thing. So, you can believe something very strongly about yourself, and it can be true, but no matter how independently minded you are, it just feels so much more real when other people corroborate what you're thinking about yourself. At that point, you know that it's true and it's not just in your head. So when you have a group of people who all share a belief, it gives you more permission to believe it. And if there's lots of other people that believe that, it applies even more. That effect is compounded. And yes, we should be independent thinkers and all of that. But the fact of the matter is we can't escape the fact that we are social creatures, and our brains, our minds are just going to believe something more if other people believe it. It's just the way that we're wired. And another thing that I've touched on earlier in this video is that the older traditions that are kind of shared by multiple people can be very unifying. They can unify lots of different people under one banner. And so they can create peace and harmony among a great number of people, and they can create incredible social cohesion and incredible social stability. And if you've all got people showing solidarity with one another because they all share the same belief, they all come from the same tradition that has had hundreds of years to permeate and encompass more people, that is an incredible safety net. You've got a much better chance of not only surviving but thriving and being happy if you've got a vibrant community of like-minded people around you to support you. And that is one thing that I think is really invaluable about the major religions and the great traditions of the past. And the loss of community is one of the great tragedies of modern society, and is doing some of the most damage to people in our society. And the sooner we can rediscover the value of community, the better. But of course, the other side of everyone being unified by a tradition is that can be very homogenous and it can be very monolithic. And it can create a situation where, you know, everyone believes the same thing, and if you deviate from that, you're seen as a dissenter, and it can lead to oppression and all that sort of thing. And it can be sort of stifling for the individual spirit if it's done the wrong way. But, you know, it depends to what extent you value your individual autonomy, or having a kind of absolute freedom, having no commitments to other people and being a free individual agent, versus having a sense of wanting to be involved in society and kind of contributing to a community. It really depends what your value system is. But if you're community oriented and you want to contribute to something bigger than yourself, then obviously an older, bigger tradition can be something that is more advantageous for you to explore than something that's very small, or which is just your own personal beliefs. And that comes down to, at the end of the day, the question of belief as a tool, and then on top of that, what are you using that tool for? And that's the question to really ask, I think, to determine whether one type of belief is better for you than another. As time has gone on, as you can probably tell, I've got much more of an appreciation for the old traditions, and even for the major religions. And, you know, but that's the conclusion that I've reached. But, you know, I'm not a dogmatist or a fundamentalist, and I can see that there's a lot of benefits and a lot of healthy ways that chaos magic can challenge the rigidity of solid structures, which I'm certainly glad that I gave myself an opportunity to explore. And hopefully this video has been helpful for you in understanding a bit about chaos magic, understanding a bit about how that relates to more traditional paradigms, how the chaos magician can play with paradigms, but also how paradigms and traditions might be worthy of respect in their own right. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to this channel. To support my work, you can subscribe to me on Odyssey as well. And if you want to give me extra support, please hit thanks or join down below. And there's the rain. Time for me to enjoy the storm that's blowing in. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.